Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to AIOps. My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems. And I just wanted to welcome all of you to our webinar today and to talk about a few logistics before we get started. So the webinar is being recorded and the lines have been muted. A recording will be sent via email to everyone on the line tomorrow, and we'll answer questions at the end in a Q&A session. So you can ask questions anytime during the presentation just by typing them into the Q&A section. And then to get us kicked off, a little bit about Excalibur Data Systems. We are a leading edge consulting firm guiding organizations through their digital transformation journey. And we work with strategic partners to bring better outcomes to our customers. And we're very excited to be co-hosting this webinar today with our partner ScienceLogic, a leader in AIOps providing modern IT operations with actionable insights to predict and resolve problems faster in a digital world. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Mike Fuson, VP and Senior Solution Architect of Excalibur Data Systems.
Hello, everyone. Mike Fuson here from Excalibur Data Systems, one of the Senior Solution Architects. And I'm very honored to be joined by Thomas Rice, one of the partner managers at ScienceLogic. Thomas, you want to say hi to everybody?
Yeah, hey everybody. Like Mike said, my name's Thomas Rice. I am a partner manager here at ScienceLogic. Used to be in sales, kind of transitioned over into the partner. So I'm definitely excited about today's session.
Great. So we're going to actually start things off with our first poll. So are those of you that are on with us currently using an AIOps platform? And so, some of you may not know what we're talking about, and that's why you're here. And some of you may know you're not. Tabitha, we want to close that poll out and see what we see as far as results are concerned.
So it looks like 60% had said no, and 20% said yes, and then 20% want to know what is AIOps.
All right. Well, for 40% of you, you're going to learn a whole lot. For the other 60%, you may learn some additional tidbits as we go along on our journey with you through AIOps. So when we start to look at AIOps, it truly is a journey to move you from a human-powered IT organization to more of a machine-powered organization. IT teams anymore are really just overloaded with work. There's manual repetitive things. There's a lot of noise coming at you at 100 miles an hour. How do we filter through all of this and become extremely effective organizations in kind of minimizing how much human interaction is really required for some of these repetitive activities that we're in? And how much human interaction is required to try to sift through a lot of that information. So you start to move from tasks to being able to effectively analyze things to moving towards true autonomy. But this is a true journey. It's not something that's done just by the flip of a switch or bringing in even a tool as magical as ScienceLogic to help you accomplish this. It's something that you need to plan for and be able to move from one side of the scale to the other. It's about gaining efficiency. It's about reducing cost. And really, quite frankly, it's about survival anymore. So many things for all of us have changed in the world with COVID this year. It certainly has affected a lot of our organizations. We may be doing more with less. Team members may have been furloughed. Many of us are wearing multiple hats. And so how do we leverage a lot of these great technologies that are out there to help us be more efficient? I mean, a large amount of time is spent just trying to figure out, hey, what are we doing when like a service outage occurs? Thomas, talk to us a little bit about that, kind of what you've seen out there as you've worked with customers on trying to make this journey and make it effective.
Yeah, and you hit one key point that I always like to talk about is doing more with less. As COVID hit, and even previously a little bit before that, IT operations spend has, always been low on the totem pole for a lot of the customers I've worked with in the past, and they have gotten limited opportunities, limited budget, or they have always threw butts at seats. That's what I like to call it. Is they always just try to find an expert for that particular application or that particular process that they need somebody there to do. And as we're moving through, and you said it, moving into more of an automated, to get to more autonomy, to be a little bit more machine powered instead of human powered, we have to come to a realization, and I want everybody to think about that today, is where are you in that scale? What process have you started, or where have you started to think when it comes to automation? What do you actually automate? There are certain processes that are easier to automate than others, and as we talk through this today, I want us to really understand and paint a picture, for yourself of, if we lose, our SharePoint guy, or if, because of the pandemic, people, tend to drop off, where would we pick up? And that's where we want you guys to start to kind of think of the uniqueness of a platform such as ScienceLogic that can help with automating some of these processings, alleviating kind of that fat finger error, and being a little bit more predictive within your environment, in order to deliver tasks faster and, analyze, the root cause of the issue, and then making recommendations, recommended actions in order to kind of figure out when and what to do. So I'm excited to kind of go into the next piece and help you guys start to paint that picture.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, Thomas, over 70% of the time required to restore a service, this is a very interesting statistic, is spent trying to determine what the root cause is and then what to do about it, right? Yeah. And human analysis of that is that most time-consuming part. That's why it takes so long. We're trying to figure out, okay, we've got all of this stuff coming at us. We have all these things going on. What's happening, and now what do we do about it? I know in our discussions you've talked about, they get a bunch of people in a room and everybody's analyzing a bunch of stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. And this whole journey is about trying to cut down and really minimize the amount of effort that we have to put out. Not that effort's a bad thing, but letting the tools help us to start to see the clear picture. And as you said, as we move into kind of looking at what are the components of AIOps, why is this such an important conversation to have, and an important capability as an organization to really look at? And you've got really an interesting way that you talk about this. I'm going to let you do your thing as you talk about this trifecta that is AIOps.
Absolutely. So as we move into the next slide, one thing I want you guys to start to put pieces together is to understand ScienceLogic. We like to break things out into 3 buckets. We like to break it out as in see, contextualize, and act. And the way the high sky level view of ScienceLogic, what I like to explain it is, Equalized view is what we do is we come into your environment, we build you a Charlotte's Web. So we have 19 to 22 different protocols, and from there we collect data from multiple different data sources. So that's compute, that's storage, that's your network, that's your servers, that's your application, that's your overall infrastructure. And then from there we actually start to build kind of that Charlotte's Web, put those pieces together and identify what is involved in everything that it points to. Let's say, for example, Active Directory, we know that that's connected to SharePoint, which also may be connected to your payroll, which also may be connected to another portion that tells you all the employees that you may have. So we start to build that for you, and then we bring it all into a single pane of glass. And the reason why that's so important is just because we all know, and I know a lot of you guys maybe run into this issue now, is it's a siloed environment. You know, you have your network guys, you have your application guys, your infrastructure guys, your operation guys. They don't talk to each other. You know, it's, hey, operations, something in, you know, like SharePoint goes down. It's the operations fault. It's their problem. They'll fix it. You know, what we try to do with ScienceLogic is bring more cohesion together, bring more team camaraderie, because of the fact that everything has little bits and pieces that it touches. And what we like to bring together is we find all the data, we build the Charlotte's Web, and then we start to build those business services. And as we start to build those business services, we start to give you recommended automations that you're able to make within your infrastructure. Let's say, for example, one I always like to talk about is, let's say Walmart.com. You know, when you go to Walmart.com, and there's a big sale going on, you know, there's a huge delay because there's multiple millions and millions of people trying to get there. What ScienceLogic helps with is saying, hey, there might be a potential for a lot of bandwidth because of this sale. We may need to load balance things out a little bit so that we don't run into any latency issues. So those are some of the things that we try to nitpick and put together so that you don't run into some of those major issues. But Mike, I want to ask you one question. A lot of people and a lot of customers that I've always spoken with, they always ask the question, well, hey, I have a lot of information versus data. You know, so I want you to talk to me a little bit about your points on information in comparison to data.
Well, data and information. So we have all of this stuff that's kind of being thrown at us. You've got kind of the data feeds, and you start to think about, well, we may have these siloed data feeds, right? And so maybe you've got this monitoring tool, or you've got this monitoring tool over here, and it's doing this, and then you've got this other thing that attaches into all the Windows servers and tries to organize all the log information that the Microsoft servers are spewing out. I think about just back in the olden days, as in my IT career, you'd go through Excalibur when we were a managed service provider. We'd be analyzing these things and going, okay, what are these critical events? And you're looking at all of this various data that's coming from all of these sources, and it's great. And it's wonderful, but and as things get more sophisticated and we start to move, stuff's moving to the cloud, and we've got stuff that's on premise, and this stuff is virtualized, and all of these different technologies that we have, you've got a lot of data coming your way. Now, how do I turn that data into actual information that I can use? And there's some salient points to this, right? According to Gartner, data scientists spend 79%. This is a crazy number to me. 79% of their time gathering or preparing data in order to do the analysis. You spend 80% of your time taking this flood of data that's coming at you and turning it into information you can use. And all of the data in the world really isn't going to help you if you can't really filter through it, see it, and understand what it is and turn it into information that you can use. And that's one of the things that's so exciting about AIOps and platforms like ScienceLogic. They give us the ability to kind of cut through that noise, because they're going, oh, well, hey, this event happened over on this SQL server, and then this other thing over here reported this, and some of this stuff's all correlated together. They're all related to the same issue. And that's now giving you information. Okay, wait a minute. As you were talking about building that Charlotte's Web, right? I think about the old song of the knee bone connected to the leg bone, to the ankle bone, right? How are all of these pieces working in concert? And our environments are so much more complex today than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Those that are with us that go back as long as I do in IT, which is, let's just say, more than a couple decades. Let's just go with that, right? I go before the time of graphical user interfaces, and in a data center, you have these physical servers, and each server had its job. And then we started to move to the virtualization space. And so a physical box was just that. It was this box, but it had multiple servers on it. Those servers can move around. They're on this box today and that box tomorrow, and but the actual servers themselves still had their roles. But you had a lot of data coming at you. We have so much larger volumes of data coming at us today. How do we translate that into information? And that's where AIOps platforms really help us, is to take that information, take that data, turn it into information, and then help us understand it so that we can use it. Kind of looking at your architecture here, taking the data, contextualizing it, and then allowing us to act upon that much more efficiently than spending 80% of our time collecting it and analyze, before we can even analyze it.
Exactly. That's definitely a key point. And one thing that you said I really like to, that always hits me is like, when you really think about it, is all the efficiencies that we may have we have Splunk, and we have, Sharewell, we have all these different applications, and we are constantly moving. Everything's constantly moving. What's that one central thing? And that's what I want you guys to think about. What's that one common denominator? And if you don't have that, who is that common denominator? Who's that one person that's able to seam this all together? And that's where I want you to kind of play ScienceLogic. Is almost the seam to everything. And what seams your full infrastructure together, brings everything into that central point, and then kind of gives you the flexibility to make actions based on the data that's provided to you. And I like the way that Mike always talks about data versus information, because we're talking about noise in comparison to actionable data. And that's kind of what we depict. It's almost like a needle in a haystack. We grab the needle directly from the haystack and be able to tell you, hey, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah, and so let's take a look at what that looks like, Thomas, in terms of ScienceLogic, the SL1 platform, right? So talk us through this a little bit of what this looks like and how this ties into what we just talked about with see, contextualize, and act.
Absolutely. So as you can see during this display, it kind of gives you a good idea of some of the pockets that we grab when it comes to data collection. So we're going everything from the cloud, applications, your logs, your ITSM tools, and then we're pulling, specific data that you want us to pull. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to contextualize that data. What I like to, we like to use the word contextualize, but all in all, what we're doing is we're normalizing the data. We're making it speak all the same language. We're taking each individual aspect, either if it's performance data, if it's config data, security data, and all we're doing is we're making it speak the same language. We're looking at all the services that are associated with it within either your applications or your infrastructure. And then, like I said, we're bringing it into that single pane of glass view so that it gives you actionable insights to be able to start to create kind of that machine learning, that automation, utilizing that AI to start doing a little bit with predictive analysis, anomaly detection, creating data flows, and giving you the flexibility to be able to do more with the data that we have, instead of trying to figure out what that data is and why it's important and why we're getting it. We kind of streamline that process and alleviate all of the extra data and give you everything that's able to be actionable. Mike, I always like to ask this question. When you're in a situation of not having something that is able to centralize everything and it is super siloed, what issues have you seen within your customers or your prospects when it comes down to not having this and having a siloed environment? Because I know a few of us may be going through that now, where we don't know how, like, this all looks great, but we are in a siloed environment now. We don't even know where to start. Where would you kind of put pieces together to help somebody understand a little bit more?
Well, what we see often and most commonly is when you don't have a platform that's able to pull the data together and provide the context, you're stuck with looking at the data in that more excuse me. So you may have data coming in, and you've got folks that are looking at these various data streams, and you're trying to pull it together and understand, well, wait a minute, okay, we're seeing these couple of events start to happen here, and that looks like it may not be a good thing. And so you start to dig into that a little bit. Okay, what servers are these on? Okay, then what's on those servers? What are those servers tied to? Being able to have that context is you're starting to build that more manually. Okay, we see the event, we know what device they're on. Okay, let's go look at that device, or maybe somebody already knows, right? That's where you start to get into that siloed information. You have the right person in the room that, by knowing the server name, goes, oh, wait a minute, that's the accounting system. Because every organization has different naming standards for servers. And so some of them, by the name, you can tell what it is. Some of them, hey, it's just whatever the next name is in rotation, right? Because they're not concerned about that. Different organizations take different approaches. And so all of a sudden, what's being affected? And then, okay, now what's that impact? Right? Is this a big deal? Is this not a big deal? How do we figure that out? And a lot of times that's, oh, you look at your IT service management system, and holy smokes, a lot of people now are logging incidents that they can't log into the accounting system. Oh, I think the accounting system has a problem. And then you start to move into that act process. Okay, now what do we do about it? What's the root cause? How do we fix it? And so without having that appropriate context, it's very, very difficult to understand what should our action be. And one of the examples that we talk about a lot is you may have a system, for example, that's web-based, right? As so many things are today. They have a web front end, but maybe you have 5 servers that are serving up that web interface sitting behind, say, a load balancer. So the loss potentially of one of those servers, okay, you've got some degraded performance, possibly. You may have no degraded performance at all, right? Depending upon the load at the time, but you're not down. Now you may have an older legacy system where one front end server being lost, systems down, systems offline, or maybe it's a more serious issue. It's the database server that's having an issue, or as we had happen with one of our customers recently, a storage array started causing some problems, and that started to affect multiple applications because different pieces of those applications or stored documents or what have you were on that particular storage array that was having an issue. So by being able to understand and have context to say, well, where in the leg bone, ankle bone, knee bone scenario, where is this? And so being able to derive, okay, what's our impact, lets you prioritize better, lets you figure out how we're going to act better. Is this, we need to pull everybody into a room and we've got to get this back up and running because it's going to cost us, this is costing us dollars and cents by the minute, or okay, let's take another look at this. Can we bring another, as we have with the Cherwell application as an example, at one of our clients who's on premise, they have 5 servers that provide the interface to the system sitting behind a load balancer. Well, we were running some different scenarios. They have a couple of servers that are sitting cold. They're off. That if they were to lose one of those servers, they could spin one of these up and drop it. And if the load balancer picks it up, you'd never know a server went down. Now you start to be able to leverage, start to move on that AIOps, and we'll talk about the maturity a little bit later. You start to move along that, from human powered. So does a human need to spin that up, or can we automatically go, oh, wait a minute, we lost something. That's here. Here's where it is. Here's our action. Bring this server online. And it's going to kind of take over that load. And but how do you get there without the ability to draw that data, to put it in context, and have the context to understand where does this sit in the overall infrastructure, and what is its level of impact, and what's being impacted by the issue we're having.
Absolutely.
That's where the power of the technology really starts to drive us, because it's something for most of us is hard to know, right? We see the server name, and maybe we've done a really, really good job of building a fairly robust CMDB on our own. And maybe we've done manual relationships between items. So we're leveraging a powerful tool like shareable service management, and we're able to, okay, we know the name of the machine. Let's go look it up in the CMDB, use the visualizer in Sharewall, and it shows us all of what's impacted. Fantastic. Well, somebody's maintaining that CMDB. Hopefully it's accurate, right? We don't necessarily have the context in a tool that may have discovered that we inserted something new in there and nobody knew about it. Not that that ever happens in anybody's IT department. I want to say for any of you that are with us, ever happens. I've seen it a couple times in my career. You know, things get moved, things get changed, and somebody forgot to update the CMDB. By being able to leverage a powerful platform, you can start to see through all of that, and it puts you in a better position to more efficiently deal with the issue at the appropriate level. Is it, is this a wake everybody up in the middle of the night thing? Really hate to wake them up and to have the, the team go, dude, there's 4 other servers that are carrying that load, and there's like 6 people on right now. Why are we all awake? Like, we can deal with this one down server in the morning. Without having the ability to get that proper context, that can be difficult to do. That's the thing that gets me so excited about, a platform like ScienceLogic, is all of a sudden you have all of this information that you could cobble together, but it was hard. All of a sudden it's made super easy, and by clicking a button on, hey, that server, it says, here's the Charlotte's Web of where this impact may draw out, and and with the right people looking at that information, they go, oh, wait a minute, if this gets worse, here's the domino effect, right? Because maybe it's a router, or it's a switch, or it's any of those things. I mean, these things die all the time. Technology, will fail us. We had a situation yesterday with one of our team members, their internet went down, and they're working from home. So now what do you do? Now, for most of us at home anymore, if our internet goes out, what else goes out? We don't have telephones, we don't have television. So you read a book, I guess, or use your cell phone, right? That's all you really have. And so the technology does fail from time to time, but how are we able to react to it? That's what gets me so excited about this. It just makes us so much better at reacting and providing that high level of service, high level of availability we're all trying to do to serve our organizations.
Completely agree with that. And as we move to the next slide, we like to talk about the common use cases that we get for AIOps. Accessing service impacts, diagnosing root cause, automating enrichment and repair, and then automating and synchronizing workflows. So I want you guys to start to think a little bit, like which one of these topics do you feel like would best suit you guys, or where do you feel like you are or having a little bit of issues with? When it comes to one of the ones that I know are really important is diagnosing root cause and making recommended actions. Because of the fact that driving business fast is what matters, being able to identify and fix the problem as quickly and efficiently as possible is where I know a lot of people are looking to be, and it's in everybody. So with ScienceLogic, the diagnosing root cause is huge, because we know the traditional way was going into a war room, and then we have every department in there. We have the apps guys, the operation guys, the infrastructure guys, the ones that handle the networks and the servers, and they're like, hey, so something went down, it must be the server's fault. They're like, nope, I checked, it's not us. Then you go to the network, and then you go to the application. And as you're doing this, we're talking about tons and tons of time being lost, which equates to a ton of money loot being lost for the business. And to be able to streamline that process and be able to give you a true diagnostics of, hey, your payroll system went down. It went through Active Directory from SharePoint, and it's just a little issue within our internal HR system that caused the problem. Alleviating the stress of maybe something that traditionally has caused you or taking you guys 5 to 7 hours, we get it down to 10 to 15 minutes. You know, that we're talking about that huge cost savings. What I ran into and I've heard from a lot, and I think Mike actually said it also, is I've heard people waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They're like, hey, our payroll system's down. We have to run payroll. Or, you know, hey, our one of our mission critical applications just went down and we don't know where the root cause is. You know, so we have somebody, you know, they have one of their guys waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to run into the office to figure out where that issue is. You know, and that's kind of always been my thought of trying to alleviate that pressure, and trying to alleviate the stress of that. So, Mike, I did want to ask you, from, you know, these 4 topics, where do you feel like your customers sit the most, or, you know, the most common one that you hear when, you know, talking to somebody?
Well, I think you hit on a one that has the most extreme immediate value, right, to customers as they kind of mature their processes. Assessing the service impact is also something that's kind of a big deal, because one of the things, Thomas, you and I have talked about extensively, is really the need for a solid CMDB, your configuration management database, being that other single pane of glass into the organization. Having a solid CMDB and then understanding, based on the issues that are present, what those impacts are. What does this particular outage potentially impact for us? Is it limited to the HR system, or does this potentially impact HR and accounting, and our purchasing departments? What is that overall impact? And as you were kind of talking there, I think back to an episode that many of us on the line may have experienced last week. So there was a little outage in a little thing called Microsoft Azure Active Directory. And that, if you weren't already pre-authenticated, you couldn't use Azure Single Sign-On, which means you couldn't access anything that was leveraging Azure Single Sign-On. Now, wouldn't it be a fantastic thing to know all of the potential systems that were impacted by that? Now, as IT folks, there was very little we could do to solve that problem. This was, you know, as we start to move stuff to the cloud, you're now dependent on someone else to resolve problems, but to understand what the potential impact is, be able to calm people down. Yes, you can't, for us, for example, we couldn't log into Sharewell. And if you weren't pre-authenticated, you know, you couldn't get into email either. That's kind of a big deal. Fortunately for us here in North America, it happened kind of later in the day. Elsewhere in the world, not so much a happy time to have those sort of issues. But we received a whole bunch of phone calls from customers saying, hey, our Sharewell, we can't log in. Well, Azure's having a problem and you're leveraging single sign-on. And so, you know, very, very rapidly by knowing that, now somebody has to trip over it first. You know, we had an easy answer, could point them to the right resources. But leveraging a platform like ScienceLogic, we would be able to lay bare what are all the potential applications that are now impacted that are leveraging Azure Single Sign-On. Or maybe you're an Okta customer. You know, so many customers are now using single sign-on technologies. If your single sign-on is having a problem, what is our level of impact? So that gets you to that assessing the service impact, right? What services are going to be affected? And then because we know it's a single service, we're immediately able to kind of hone in on, here's the root cause and what are our actions, if there's any that you can take, right? Our only action might be posting notifications, or maybe we have a system that's able to send out texts or whatnot. I know I've seen that with a number of our customers, where we're working with them and we'll get a text message when they've had a system go down that could have a higher level of impact. But it lets you get to that very, very quickly. And these are things that we've seen in just last week, and they're going to happen again, and they're going to happen again. These things aren't going to be up 100% perfect all of the time, as much as we'd want them to. And so that's what we see a lot of our customers is being able to understand, by that being down, what are the things impacted, and being able to communicate that effectively, and then moving into finding the root cause and figuring out what our next action is. Is that as simple as rebooting identity server or whatnot? Being able to understand it and how we're going to restore that service to the customers.
That makes, no, I completely agree, and I absolutely understand that portion of just identifying and being able to get to that point. If not, from what I've heard and what I've seen in the past, if that's not the most important, just because a business being down, and I always like to use this example. So in 2005 at the Super Bowl, Victoria's Secret had an ad or commercial, and during that time, Victoria's Secret's website went down. So again, we're talking about millions of folks saying, oh, hey, there's a Victoria's Secret. Maybe I want to buy something for my significant other, or maybe I want to get something for myself. And that period of time, with them not having the flexibility to be able to go ahead and go to the website, that's a lot of lost revenue. And there's a bunch of other situations that happens all the time where the opportunity that you get because of a sale or because of something around that nature, and then something like your website going down, or the payment system is not working, those type of things. We know how important those are. So ScienceLogic prides themselves on being able to help you identify those things a lot quicker, so that you don't run into issues like that. And as we start to get through towards the end, we'll kind of talk through the process on where you want to be in order to kind of get to this next level as you're walking through this journey to AIOps. So for this next, for the next slide, I kind of just want to show you, give you a few examples of some of the business outcomes of a few customers that me and ScienceLogic have kind of went through.
We're going to take a quick poll here to see for our audience, what are some of the key challenges you are looking to solve with the automation AIOps provides, and select any, all, many of the above. Tabitha's going to open that poll of some of the things that we just talked about. What would drive the most value to your business? I mean, Thomas and I think, have a good idea of what these answers are going to look like, because of course we focused in on a couple specifically. So Tabitha, let's see what the poll results tell us.
Wow.
Are you able to see those, Mike and Thomas? Quicker diagnosis of root causes, keeping the CMDB up to date, and automated triage and remediation.
Yeah, so exactly as we had kind of talked about, Thomas, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that have the largest and most significant impact for our customers? And so you wanted to talk about a couple of these business outcomes that we've seen, and the things that, and the power that ScienceLogic has brought to a sample, a very tiny sampling of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So for FleetCore, and as you can see, the ones at the bottom, it'll go through each piece on kind of what their main focal point was. But for FleetCore, what they were truly trying to achieve is just faster response time through business services. So when we were engaging and talking to them, we were, just trying to, understand, what does faster response time mean? And that's always a question I like to ask, like, what do you mean, by faster response time? Do you just want to have the ability to see the data faster, or have the ability to find out, what's going on with, with a particular application? It's good to know that information, but what actions do you want to make towards it? You know, and that's what we try to identify. So once we were able to really understand, we were able to actually achieve 97% faster response times by helping them with just connecting automating their processes and just connecting their applications and infrastructure together. You know, that just making that small move of just adding in a little bit more additional connection pieces in between the application and infrastructure, they automatically were able to achieve that faster response time. So for our next one, for Hughes, one thing and this one I really like to talk about, because this one is really about visibility, and it's really helping them understand what they have, you know, what satellites they have and what services they have that are connected to those. So what we, you know, when ScienceLogic was talking to Hughes, one thing that they asked is, you know, about just the data altogether. And at the end of the day, data is data. If we can connect to it, we can pull it. You know, that's the versatility that ScienceLogic has, is having that ability to pull, as long as we can go connect either through some native integration, custom API, or some of the integrations that we have in some of the also Power Packs. If we're able to connect to it, we're able to pull some sort of data for you. And for Hughes, what we were able to do is pull some of the weather data that they had. So with some of that weather data that they were looking for, we were able to not only pull it, but then we were able to also help them to diagnose the weather data and then send that over to, you know, their satellites and to their teams to let them know, hey, there's a storm coming, or there's a tornado coming, or there's some anomaly in the weather. And I like to talk about Hughes because that shows a lot of our versatility. There's weather data. You know, we've worked with companies that needed help with meter data. Then there's just standard, you know, the standard applications, the Splunks, the log data, the different applications. So like I said, if we can connect to it, we can pull it. So for Cisco, I want you to, as we all know, Cisco's huge, and even Cisco was having some issues with their manual processes. So before we talked to Cisco, they had roughly, I think there was about 13, 14 different processing systems from when they got an incident ticket. So as soon as they got an incident ticket, they had about 13 to 14 different processes before it even got into the point of resolving an issue. And when bringing in ScienceLogic, what they were able to do is automate that. So what they did was they automated their incident ticketing system by the direct integrations that we had with their ITSM tool, and alleviated some of that time that it took to walk through a full incident, you know, put it on what tier system that it needed to be on. And as you can see, you know, the productivity savings in reference to just making that little change from going the manual to automating the process changed everything. And I want you guys to think about it, and I want you guys to understand that we can do this, to kind of do the same thing for you guys, because the one big issue and the one big thing I want you to remember, understand about Cisco was at a point of 5-hour average incident ticket resolution time. We got it down to 19 minutes. So saving that time that they had from their typical 5 hours to 19 minutes changed the game for them. You know, was able to alleviate some of that pressure on some of their high tier guys and get them back to doing projects that, you know, they're there to do, you know, instead of worrying about some of the mundane activities within the incident ticketing system. And then for Net Design is an MSP, and they were just looking to essentially just onboard faster, because as we know, if you onboard faster, that's faster revenue, that's, you know, faster to customer success, which would alleviate some of the SLA breaches that they were having prior to implementing ScienceLogic. So the three things I like to say when it comes to this is data, analytics, automation. Those are the three pieces that me and Mike are really trying to help you guys really understand, because those are what drive to AIOps. Those are those key functions. But Mike, I did want to ask you a question on this slide. Is there one particular subject within this piece that really resonates well with you and the kind of the patterns of your customers? You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry, I was muted. For sure, as we talked about in our last slide, really that assessing the service impacts and the diagnosing the root causes, when we look at what FleetCor and what Hughes was able to do, that's what helps to drive the capabilities for an organization and starts to drive them forward when you're leveraging a platform like ScienceLogic. So let's talk for a moment about, you know, what is this maturity like? How do we get from human-powered IT to machine-powered IT? And we have kind of these levels of maturity, if you will. We want to throw a quick poll out there and ask our audience where they feel they are on this maturity spectrum. You know, are you a level 0 to a 1, a 1 to a 2, a 2 to a 3, so on and so forth. So Tabitha, can we throw that poll up there real quick? Right, and I'm going to predict that most are a 0 to 1 or a 1 to 2.
It looks like 100% put a level 0 to 1.
Okay, which is pretty common and why we're having this conversation to begin with, right? How do we leverage and get you moving on your AIOps journey from a human-powered IT over to a machine-powered IT? And it doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey. There are steps to the journey, right? Getting to a more truly intelligent, more automated process requires getting to maturity, and you start to look at, to get to a level 1. Now you're collecting your data in at least silos, right? And then as you start to move to a 2, which is what ScienceLogic really starts to bring to the table, is that data swamp, right? We've got the data that we can now turn into information, and even leveraging the human-driven analytics and starting to do automated enrichments, and then moving across our maturity, right? You start to get into data curation, and having the system start to help you understand what it is that you're looking at and what you may want to do, and then you ultimately hopefully get to a 4 or 5. Those are difficult levels to get to for anyone because it requires a plan. And Thomas, we've talked about, okay, what does it take to do this, right? And that's what it takes. Is it takes a plan and a level of commitment to be able to start to move yourself from a lower maturity to a high maturity. It's no different than moving your maturity if you're an ITIL shop, or you're a CMMI shop, or you're leveraging any sort of best practice. You don't start out as a level 5. Nobody does. You start out at a lower level of maturity, and you begin to mature the organization. And that's with a plan and with putting in some time and energy to move your efforts along. Thomas, any other thoughts on mapping out your AIOps journey?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit everything on the head. The one thing that I want to say, and I want everybody to understand, is when you think about a company like Cisco, they're only in between a 3 and a 4. So they're still in the process of getting some of that machine-driven analytics, doing some more of the data synchronization, bringing in some more of the data lakes and pulling all that data together. So I want you guys to completely understand that 0 to 1 is very standard, and the easiest the way I want you to think about it is you've already identified that you know where you are and where you're looking to go. So I think those are key portions to really start to kind of align yourself with and try to understand a little bit more. What automations could be put in place, what analytics could you start adding in, what data, why is the data bad? What could we do to change that data? What processes could we potentially put in place to help that out? Is there any technology that we have as of today that is doing any of this, and if we don't have it, what is our strategy in order to start that process? Because of course everybody wants to get to a 5. I want to see an environment that's a 5, because that would be amazing. Self-healing, that means, you know, predictive analytics, that means fully automated, fully autonomy, that means you're literally a well-oiled machine that's all working within itself. You're just hitting a checkbox. That's, you know, that's a point that we want to get to. But as we start to walk through, I just want you guys to ask yourselves those few questions to help kind of get not if you're in the process of just looking at something, or if you're in the process of putting together some sort of justification documentation on why you need it. These are the key buckets that I think will help you get to that next point.
Absolutely, and you start to look at the way the technology is evolving, and what ScienceLogic is doing with the SL1 platform to continue to evolve at almost the bleeding edge of the AI technology, the machine learning technology, to start to drive and make actually this maturity process possibly for a lot of us easier than it would have been, say, just 2 years ago or 5 years ago. These were more difficult things to do because some of the technology wasn't here, and we're now leveraging more of this technology to drive us more quickly to being able to build that and contextualize all that data we're getting to turn it into information, right? Those were hard things to do before. Now they've become much easier with the technology that's available to us. And so we want to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to open the floor to some questions, but we have one final question, poll question for the audience, where this is merely the beginning of the journey and talking about the journey. What would you like us to talk to you about next as it relates to the AIOps journey that we could maybe do a deep dive into? So Tabitha, can we throw that 4th poll up there? We've got some different topics on the screen because we're looking at this being a multi-part series to be able to do some deep dives into this. This is that starter discussion, the start of the learning, and we want to be able to deep dive and provide some deeper education. So Tabitha, you want to go ahead and close that out, and we'll take that information. So what was our top winner here, Tabitha?
Discovery and dependency mapping.
Okay, which Thomas, as we've talked about, right, is that 0 to 1. That's one of the starts of the journey. That's that first step in understanding how all the stuff ties together. How appropriate. That's so exciting. So Tabitha, I know you had kind of messaged me in the background. We have a couple of questions that have been asked.
Yeah, we did have a couple questions come in during the presentation, and I think a good place to start, just to kind of encompass a few, is in both of your experience, where would you say customers are misguided when it comes to their thoughts and opinions on AIOps?
I'll start that off. One thing that I've heard a lot, because AIOps is not really, it hasn't even been defined, I would call it. It hasn't been truly defined of what AIOps means. So it's everybody's opinion and thoughts on it are so different. You know, in AIOps, artificial intelligence. So people are thinking robotics. People are thinking, I've heard a guy ask me, hey, does ScienceLogic have a system that you can put in place that has a chip that goes into our servers that are able to then do their own analytics and put pieces together, and it confuses. I think the point of the word of AIOps, it's confusing to a lot of people. In the midst of it, it is automation and machine learning. It's just driving data from moving from solely human powered, giving our machines the ability to gather data, start to build it based on, you know, previous data, and then making recommended actions based off of it. You know, Mike, I know you have a good answer for that one.
Yeah, look, it was funny because I was like, oh, he stole my answer. So often we would hear things when you start to think about AI. You know, people are you know, you start to think about the Terminator and Skynet. Is what you know, what I start to go back to. They think, well, AI and, you know, the machines are going to take over. AI is still a relatively new technology. It's not going to replace the human brain. The human eyes and brain can process information even more quickly than a computer can. As far as drawing a lot of parallels, what this technology is allowing us to do is to start to draw that together. And as we talked about during our presentation, is to contextualize that and understand, hey, these things are interrelated without us having to look at, you know, 5 different streams of data and try to put it together. It's starting to draw these things together. But your main point, AIOps is still, we're not sure what it is exactly. It's kind of a big bucket right now. And I think we're going to see it start to winnow down. I think back to gamification, being in the IT service management industry as long as I have. Gamification, which some marketer came up with that, and it was a great term. Nobody knew exactly what it meant, and there was a lot of ideas of what it meant. What we see is really leveraging and making our operations process better, leveraging machine learning and the AI technologies as they continue to improve. I mean, literally quarter by quarter, these technologies are getting better and better and better, and they're going to help us as a result be better at servicing our customers.
Thank you both. I did want to hit 2 more questions. So really quickly, what ITSM tools or platforms can ScienceLogic integrate with?
So we can actually integrate, and I'll go back to it. We can integrate with anything. The main 3 that we work with are BMC, ServiceNow, and Sharewell. But we can also integrate with almost any ITSM tool, as long as there's something that we can a collector or some sort of way that we can connect to it. Okay. So any API or anything around that nature. Yeah.
And then as we wind down the presentation and the webinar, I just wanted to ask if one of the organization's goals for the upcoming year is to launch an AIOps solution, how realistic is that goal, and how long of a process does that entail?
Well, I'll run with this one, Tabitha. If there was anything that you were going to do, of course, you know, those in the audience who have attended a number of my sessions, I am the CMDB lover of all lovers. I love the CMDB. I love the things that the CMDB can do for the organization. And ScienceLogic is a tool that helps us make the CMDB and put it on steroids and do all kinds of crazy stuff for our organization. Now, one of the challenges is if that's a goal, that's a great goal to have, because it lays bare so much within the organization and making the organization better. To put a time on it is going to really depend on the organization and the organization's level of maturity as it relates to doing things around implementing a tool. You're implementing a new tool set. If you're implementing ScienceLogic as an example, and it's not something that's going to be done overnight. It's going to take some time. You're going to have a plan. So the better plan you have, the more support that you have to do it, the quicker you're going to be able to do it. You know, some organizations might be very successful and get to updating, you know, getting to a new maturity level in a matter of literally months, if the right effort and the right focus is put on it. It may take another organization 6 months or a year to achieve the same set of goals. So there's no cookie cutter right answer that, hey, we do this and it's going to magically make everything better. This is going to take some effort. It's going to take some dedication. It's going to take a good plan. But as we've seen just from the few examples that Thomas shared, and there's tens of thousands of ScienceLogic customers that are out there, I mean, back in our MSP days, but ScienceLogic isn't a company that just started doing this a couple weeks ago or a couple years ago. You know, this has been, you know, decades in the industry, and having the understanding of the industry and continuing to evolve as our industries evolve. The tools and the capabilities are there, and so your timeline is going to really depend on your level of dedication, your plan, and how much effort you're willing to put out to do it. But the tool is going to make that process much easier. Much of what we've talked about you could do manually with 5 or 6 different tools. And again, now we're talking about 5 or 6 different tools rather than bringing it all into one single pane of glass that's going to help you organize and understand this. Thomas, you've seen this as well. I'll let you wrap us up with some final thoughts.
Yeah, so overall, and from, you know, the multiple different, you know, places I've worked over the years, I've always been around kind of the same thing as automation. And when I speak to people about starting an AIOps journey, I always talk to them about the first thing we need to do is understand where you are as of today. Coming into a realization that, all right, you're not pulling the best data, or your CMDB is not accurate, or your environments are so siloed that you don't have the flexibility to be able to even put together enough data to be able to start it. So what I would say is, if the person that asked this question, if you can start an AI, if you know you're in the process of starting an AIOps journey, the first thing I would do is understand where you are as of today. You know, you know, if you do manual processes now, you know, kind of put all that together and then give us a call. I think we'll be able to help help you identify and understand a little bit more surrounding what your overall objective is, and we can kind of compare it to that and then build a personal plan to help you get and reach to your AIOps goals. Because I like to understand a little bit more, you know, if you're looking to start, you know, AIOps journey as of today, what hasn't been working that caused you to want to do this? You know, what are you trying to achieve with becoming more automated? So it's a few things that I want to understand a little bit more, so that we can kind of build a custom, you know, plan for you in order to how to help you get to that point.
Thank you, Thomas. So I wanted to thank
Well,
both of you for being
Thomas,
on the
for
line.
joining Excalibur.
And we will wrap this up. So then I will talk to you guys again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.